everyone. Today I have a story that dives into the life of a man who had it all: power, wealth, influence. Yet he's blind to the simplest of virtues: humility. Victor Hardwell thought the world was his stage, where he could manipulate and mock those around him for his amusement. But one fateful evening, he met his match in the most unlikely person, and his life would never be the same. Victor Hardwell was a man who had everything: wealth, power, and influence. A self-made billionaire with a sharp mind for business, he had conquered the world of high-stakes deals, leaving behind a trail of broken partnerships and bruised egos. His success was undeniable, but so was his arrogance. The people who worked for him were merely tools to be used, and he often took great pleasure in reminding them of their place. His mansion, perched on a hill overlooking the city, was a symbol of his triumph, his empire. One particular evening, Victor hosted a lavish business dinner at his mansion. The guests were an elite group of his most important clients, investors and influential figures. The grand dining hall was adorned with glittering chandeliers, and the long oak table was filled with extravagant platters of food, carefully curated wine, and the finest delicacies. Everything had to be perfect for this exclusive event. Yet amid the sparkling glasses and polished silverware, Victor's mind was elsewhere, fixated on a cruel idea that had been simmering in his thoughts. Maria, his maid, had been working for him for over a year now. She was quiet, diligent, and invisible in the grand scheme of things, or so Victor thought. She had grown up in a modest household and had been raised with values of humility and grace. But Victor was convinced that the world was harsh, and he enjoyed the power he wielded over those who worked for him. That evening, he decided to test her, to prove once again that he was in control. "Maria!" he called out as he entered the kitchen, his voice dripping with condescension. "Come here." Maria looked up from her task, surprised by the sudden summons. She had always maintained a polite distance from her employer, never daring to speak unless spoken to. "Yes, Mr. Hardwell," she replied, her voice soft and respectful. Victor smirked, already planning his next move. "Since you're always so quiet, I thought it might be fun to liven up the evening a bit," he said, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "I want you to sing for my guests tonight. Something simple, something that'll give everyone a good laugh. You know, a little entertainment." Maria stood frozen, her heart racing. She had never been asked to sing before, let alone in front of a room full of strangers. She had always loved music, but her voice had been a private solace, something she shared only with herself. The thought of singing for a group of wealthy, powerful people terrified her. "Mr. Hardwell, I don't think that's a good idea," Maria stammered, her cheeks flushing. Victor's smile only widened. "Don't worry, it'll be fine. Just pick something. You'll be the highlight of the night, trust me." Maria hesitated, but the pressure in Victor's tone made it impossible to refuse. She nodded silently, feeling a lump form in her throat. She had no choice. If she didn't comply, she knew there would be consequences. She retreated to the kitchen, her mind swirling with doubt. As the guests arrived, Maria's heart pounded in her chest. The room was filled with laughter and clinking glasses, but all she could think about was the moment when she would have to step into the spotlight. She had always been careful to avoid drawing attention to herself, but tonight she had no escape. The dinner proceeded smoothly, with Victor making his usual grandiose speeches, impressing his clients with his charm and wit. As the evening wore on, he suddenly stood up and raised his glass to signal the entertainment he had planned. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor's voice rang out across the room, "I have a special treat for you tonight. Our very own Maria will grace us with a song." The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to Maria, who stood in the doorway, her hands trembling at her sides. She had been summoned to the center of the room, the spotlight now cruelly focused on her. Victor's smug expression did nothing to ease her nerves. He expected her to fail, to fumble through a song, and provide him with the entertainment he so desperately wanted. Maria could feel the weight of his gaze upon her, and she wanted to shrink into the shadows. But then, something inside her shifted. She wasn't just there to amuse him or anyone else. She was there as a person with her own worth, her dignity. Taking a deep breath, Maria walked to the piano in the corner of the room, where a grand ivory instrument stood. Her fingers brushed the keys, and for a moment she closed her eyes. The pressure melted away as she remembered the music she loved, the songs that had always brought her comfort. She didn't owe anyone a performance. She owed herself the freedom to be who she truly was. With steady hands, Maria began to play. The first notes filled the room, soft and haunting, carrying a melody that spoke of hope, heartache, and resilience. Her voice, initially shaky, soon grew more confident as she sang. The song was one she had heard as a child, a soulful ballad about overcoming obstacles and finding light in the darkest of times. It was a song that had always resonated with her, capturing the very essence of her struggles and dreams. As Maria sang, something remarkable happened. The room, once filled with murmurs and laughter, fell completely silent. The guests, captivated by her voice, leaned in closer, hanging on every note. There was no mockery, no laughter. Instead, they were entranced by the power and depth of her performance. Victor, who had been watching with a smirk, suddenly found himself struck by the intensity of the song. He hadn't expected this. Maria's voice wasn't awkward or out of place. It was beautiful, raw, and filled with emotion that cut through the air like a blade. For the first time he felt something: guilt, admiration, maybe even shame. As the song ended, the room erupted into applause, louder than Victor had ever heard at one of his business dinners. His clients were on their feet, clapping and cheering. They couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Victor, too stunned to speak, stood frozen. His plans had backfired in a way he hadn't anticipated. He had expected to humiliate Maria, but instead, she had shown him the depth of her talent and humanity. The next morning, Victor was still reeling from the events of the previous night. His mind kept returning to Maria's voice, to the raw emotion that had poured from her. It was impossible to ignore, and he couldn't help but feel humbled. Later that day, one of his top clients, a wealthy music producer named Gregory Harmon, called him. He had been at the dinner the night before and had been moved by Maria's performance. "I need to talk to you about something," Gregory said. "That maid of yours, she's got talent, real talent. I think we could make something of her. I'd like to offer her a music career." Victor's heart skipped a beat. A career? For Maria? He had never considered such a thing, but as he thought about it, he realized it made sense. Her voice had captivated everyone in the room. It was no longer just a passing curiosity. It was a gift that deserved to be nurtured. He arranged a meeting between Maria and Gregory. The next few weeks were a whirlwind for Maria, who couldn't believe the opportunity she had been given. She had never dreamed of a music career, but now, with Gregory's guidance, she was on her way to something far bigger than she could have ever imagined. Meanwhile, Victor had his transformation to undergo. He had spent his life using people to get ahead, treating them like pawns in his game of power. But Maria's unwavering authenticity and grace had shaken him to his core. For the first time, he began to understand the value of kindness, humility, and the importance of recognizing the humanity in others. As Maria's career blossomed, Victor couldn't help but feel proud of her, even though he had initially sought to humiliate her. He had underestimated her, and in doing so, he had learned a valuable lesson about the true meaning of success. It wasn't about money, power, or status. It was about recognizing the potential in others and lifting them. In the end, Victor and Maria's paths crossed again, but this time it wasn't about business or wealth. It was about mutual respect and understanding. Victor had learned to appreciate the things that truly mattered, and Maria had found a career that allowed her to shine. Victor's empire continued to thrive, but his heart had been forever changed. He no longer saw people as means to an end, but as individuals with their dreams and struggles. Maria, who had once been invisible to him, had become the person who helped him rediscover the importance of compassion, humility, and the power of a single voice to change the world. True success is not measured by wealth, but by the ability to recognize and nurture the potential in others. Kindness and humility are invaluable, and they can change not only lives but also the course of destiny.